welcome back to Psychotropic Release, where I talk about all things mental health and psychedelics. I'm your favorite queer, neurodivergent, anxious, depressed girly, and today I thought we would talk about everyone's favorite topic, sex. Specifically casual sex in regards to people who may identify as a highly empathetic or as a highly sensitive person. But before we talk about the sex aspect of it all, let's talk about highly sensitive people, or HSPs. So people who identify as a highly sensitive person have a different central nervous system structure that tends to make us overall more sensitive. There's a few things that characterize high sensitivity. Overall, it's really sensory processing sensitivity. We literally process our environments and emotions on a more sensitive level than the average person. Specifically, people who are highly sensitive have a deeper sense of processing. We literally take in stimulus at a deeper level, or too much stimulation in a shorter amount of time. So this can easily make us feel overstimulated. It could be auditory, emotional, and visual stimulation, even touch. Overall, it feels more intense to us. And a lot of the time, emotional reactivity, when it's related to more negative emotions, we tend to get more emotional. We experience emotions really deeply. We are just really deep feelers. And not only is it the stimulation aspect of it, it's also we have a lower tolerance to stimuli as well. We notice subtleties in our environment much more. So changes in the environment are really noticeable to highly sensitive people, and we tend to be more perceptive. Now, highly sensitivity is a genetic trait. This isn't a disorder or problem. It's a trait just like many other things. And unfortunately, our society doesn't really praise or always respect people who are very sensitive. It tends to be viewed as a weakness in our society, which over time, if you're a child who is a highly sensitive person, you tend to start having experiences in the world which could feel negative, and we tend to try to hide or diminish our sensitivity for survival, which can lead to a lot of long-term problems like pushing aside our emotional needs and boundaries to more easily be accepted into our world. But when you get into a place like I have, where you embrace your sensitivity and you start seeing it as your authentic truth, and when you start to accept your authentic self, you become more in alignment with yourself. And recognizing that people may not understand, or society may not understand, but I respect myself to have certain boundaries and expectations from myself and others to feel more at ease. So overall, our sensitive nature is tied into our sensuality. I think that they really overlap between inherent sensitivity and our sensual self are really greatly related. If you think about it, the more sensitive you are to stimuli, of course that would affect sex. Now, I think casual sex, for numerous reasons, can bring up a lot of relationship and emotional complications. Casual sex literally implies that you and that other person are in some sort of ambiguous relationship, whether it's a one-night stand or a situationship or friends with benefits type deal. Casual sex brings up a lot of ambiguity. However, the one thing with casual sex that remains certain is typically because you aren't in a committed relationship with this person. I think it's safe to say you just don't know them all that well. You haven't gotten to know them on a personal, deep, emotional, spiritual level. And people who are emotionally sensitive tend to need or desire emotional connection in order to feel safe and enjoy physical intimacy. When you sleep with someone you don't have an emotional connection to because you don't know them very well, you really don't know where they are mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when you have a very intimate, physical, and energetic exchange with someone, a lot of emotional energy can and most likely will be exchanged. Now, energy is constantly being exchanged all the time, all around us. All the time, energy is flowing and transferring, whether it's through physical touch or simply energetically. And this occurs definitely during physical contact. So if you identify as an HSP, like me, I'm sure you have had one interaction with someone where you touched them and afterwards you felt a whole surge of emotions that were really overwhelming and can be really intense. The most non-sexual energetic exchange I've ever had and felt in my life was actually when I hugged someone. I never ever had this experience before. It's only happened once, but I'll honestly never forget it because of how intense and powerful it felt. I got close to someone over a really short period of time, and I felt deeply, deeply empathetic for this person to the point where I actually found it extremely overwhelming. Even being around them made me feel very heightened, emotionally heightened, I would say. Every emotion I felt was intensified, and I felt extremely hypervigilant to their emotions and their facial expressions to the point where when they were not okay, I was not okay. Like physically, emotionally, energetically, I felt a wide range of very intense emotions with this person, from extreme gratitude and happiness to overwhelmingly sad, worried, and anxious. And this was simply just being around them. It was very emotionally intense. I've never experienced anything like it before. And because of that, it was also super confusing and overwhelming to me. So after weeks of being around each other, me getting to know him fairly well and really, really caring about him, we hugged after weeks of being around each other for the first time. And the hug itself was normal and fine. But when I left this person afterwards, I felt very physically ill. I was driving home and I literally had to pull over because I got physically sick. I was staying with some people at the time, and the woman I was staying with looked at me and was like, "Are you okay? You really don't look good." And I wasn't offended at all because after hugging this person, I literally felt so sick. So it was really validating to hear that it wasn't just in my head. And I knew it wasn't just me because it was clearly written all over my face as well. And I realized that I energetically could feel a lot of what they were feeling, just severe depression, anxiety, self-loathing, fear, worry. And it's like when I touched them, I could literally feel it myself. And again, I do identify as a highly sensitive person. I feel emotions very deeply. I feel the emotions of others, especially when I feel really close to them. So when people are very sensitive, very empathetic, or even spiritual, you could take on a lot of emotions and feelings from someone through sex. You could wake up the next day feeling more anxious or sad, or a lot of emotions that may or may not be yours, that either got brought up from the intimate exchange or was brought into you from your partner's mental and emotional state at that time. Okay, so I completely forgot to add this in, and I want to add it in because I think it's kind of funny, but my therapist, the best therapist I've ever had, we've talked about casual sex, and she likes to call it the cheeseburger or fast food of sex because it's like easy and convenient, and while you're eating it, it tastes super good and amazing, and then afterwards you're left feeling like gross and kind of regretting and being like, why did I just eat that? Why did I just do that? That was weird. Like, that was a lot. So yeah, casual sex is a cheeseburger of sex, and I don't know about you, I rather have Michelin star sex than McDonald's sex. So yeah, sex is obviously the most physically intimate thing you could do with someone, so you really already are opening up yourself physically and emotionally. And when you are already sensitive to emotions and energy of yourself and others, you could feel the person's emotions more deeply through this energetic physical exchange Also, sex leaves you feeling pretty vulnerable and open. So if you are an HSP or spiritual or deeply emotional feeling type person, this energetic exchange may feel even more intense to you. Now, I'm not saying that this is inherently bad, but if you're not aware of the fact that you're super emotionally sensitive or energetically sensitive, you may not be aware of how much casual sex affects your own emotions and mental health. When you're more empathetic, you're more open and permeable to being impressed by the emotions of others. And again, this could be really intensified through sexual interaction. I know there are a lot of people who disagree with this statement I'm about to say. I would have probably disagreed with it as well a few years ago, but as I've gotten even more self-aware and more honest with who I am and have become more spiritual, I don't ever really believe something is just sex. Like, oh, it's just physical, it's just sex, because it's really not. It's not just sex. There's a whole emotional and spiritual entanglement there. I mean, sex can be really powerful. It is literally the act that creates human life, at least in the heterosexual sense. So something that powerful that can literally create life has a lot of power and energy to it. Overall, I believe casual sex doesn't open up the conversation sex really entails on every level, because it's just that casual. You have a really physical, intimate moment with someone who doesn't know your emotional needs or boundaries. Now, I don't want to say casual sex is morally bad or wrong, but if you're in a place in your life or your personality desires or requires more to feel more stable, safe, and secure, that's a great thing to know about yourself and choose for yourself. I think it's a really high level of self-respect and love and care to openly know what you need to feel healthy in order to have a sexual relationship with someone. What emotional, physical things do you require to feel good about the sexual encounter, and consider those when you have a sexual relationship with someone. Now, for me, I'm really happy to say that I'm choosing to no longer have casual sex, because right now in my life, and because of just who I am, I have really realized that I like sex to be emotionally based. I only want to be sexually intimate with people who, or someone who I connect with deeply emotionally, and I feel like I could be really vulnerable with. At this time, the thought of being intimate with someone who doesn't know me, like the core of me, or I don't feel emotionally safe with, is not at all attractive to me. And looking at my personality traits, my inner wounds that I have, and what I desire right now in my life, there's just no room for casual sex. And to be honest, I don't think there ever will be again, which I am really happy about. Now, I am grateful for all the experiences I've had in my life, and I need to have those experiences to figure out what I want and need. For instance, I realize that I like to spend time with my partner afterwards. I want to cuddle or talk or go for a walk or go to sleep, cook, paint, anything. I find that immediate separation after intimacy can trigger attachment anxiety within me. It's just like we're super physically close, literally, and then going to the opposite extreme of not being physically near each other is too much of a stark difference for me. Now, of course, if we are in a relationship, that's not always necessary or practical, but I feel like the post-sex bonding is really important to me, and I also just enjoy it. And if someone can't or isn't willing to give that to me, then that's an immediate deal breaker. The let's have sex and immediately get up and get dressed and move on is something I honestly don't think I'll ever want to do again. And that makes me feel really good that I've set my standard to that, and that I love and respect myself enough to not settle for that type of sexual scenario. There is a term called postcoital dysphoria, meaning that people can tend to become more emotional. You are in this heightened emotional state because you just had a deeply intimate, intense physical experience with someone. People can feel sad, or other feelings may come up, And that's totally normal. It's a normal response to feel emotional during or after having sex with someone, especially if you're in an intimate relationship with them. So again, since I'm a deeply emotional feeling person, I don't feel comfortable being physically intimate with someone who I know wouldn't be receptive to my emotional needs or expression, whether positive or negative. Sex is an extremely vulnerable act, and I personally don't want to be vulnerable with someone physically if I can't be vulnerable with them emotionally. I wish that I knew so much sooner that the link between being an HSP and being deeply emotional and sex is so clearly connected. And so I hope that people who view this video who identify as a highly sensitive person or a deeply feeling emotional sensitive person may start reviewing and thinking about how sex really affects them. We live in a society where hookup culture and casual sex is almost encouraged and is very much normalized. And while there are people, I am sure, that can engage in casual sex no problem, it's not for everyone, and that's okay. I really wish American society would start moving away from promoting hookup culture so much and really talk about more of the seriousness of sex and how it could really impact your mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health and well-being. I hope you took something from this one-sided conversation, and I really hope there begins to be more awareness around highly sensitive people as a whole. I don't want people to think there's something wrong with them because they struggle with having casual sex. It's normal to have emotions be tied to sex. That's normal. Sex can and should be a very emotionally based experience. If you like these types of conversations about mental and emotional health, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel.